Warning: the following episode contains depictions of cannibalism and a brief mention of necrophilia. Please stay safe. A kiss is the beginning of cannibalism. George Bataille. The passion of young lovers is often described as wanting to be in each other's skin or wanting to consume each other. This passion, this obsession, is metaphorical. A desire to be as close as possible, a desire to be one. Sometimes this desire turns literal. The obsession becomes a burning physical need. This can come out in a variety of forms, such as stalking, sexual deviancy, and violence. But once in a while, the need to consume becomes exactly what it sounds like. On April 26, 1949, in the Hyogo prefecture of Kobe, Japan, Issei Sagawa was born to wealthy parents. He was a premature baby, and his father Akira said he was so small he fit into the palm of Akira's hand. His underdeveloped body was not prepared for the world, and he got sick almost as soon as he was born. Issei developed a disease of the small intestine called enteritis, which was treated by several injections of potassium and calcium in saline. Issei was an introverted child, and due to this and his poor health, he turned to literature and media to keep him company. His grandfather would encourage Issei's interest in the darker side of both by taking him to watch violent and horrific movies. As he grew, Issei developed a stronger interest in Western culture and language. He believed learning about these would open a wider world of art and literature. It also gave him greater access to the topics of death and the macabre. Issei's interest in the darker subjects would soon turn to obsession, and this obsession would start to manifest as disturbing sexual fantasies and perversions. As a teenager, he began to have intense fantasies involving cannibalism. Issei would later claim these fantasies were fueled by a desire to consume and preserve his lover's beauty. Issei's newly sparked interest in cannibalism grew, and soon he could no longer keep to fantasies as his only outlet. He began to experiment with the fetish, eating raw meat, and even his own flesh. When he was 24, Issei's desires could no longer be contained. While he was studying at Waco University in Tokyo, his impulses got the better of him, and he followed a tall German woman home. He waited until she went to sleep and broke into her apartment. Issei intended to slice a piece of flesh off the woman's buttocks and sneak out with his prize. Unfortunately for him, and fortunately for the victim, she woke up before he could enact his plan. She shoved Issei to the ground in defense, and he would be arrested not long after. The police charged him with attempted rape, but the charges would be dropped when Akira Sagawa paid the victim off with an unknown settlement. Issei never confessed his true intentions that night. After completing his studies at Waco University, Issei would go on to complete his master's degree in English literature at Kwansei Gakuin University in Tokyo in 1977. Wishing to pursue a PhD, he would move to France where he could attend the Sorbonne in Paris. Paris did not do good things for Issei's sexual appetite and perversions. He admitted that almost every night that he lived in the city, he would hire a prostitute. He would take them home with the intention of killing and eating them. But every time he tried to shoot them, his fingers would freeze up, and he was unable to pull the trigger. Despite his nights of depravity and uncertainty, Issei's days were spent studying literature. During one of these days, he met his Dutch classmate, René Hartveld. René was 25 years old and 5 foot 10 inches tall. She was beautiful and healthy, the exact opposite of how Issei viewed himself. He saw himself as small, only 4'9", and old at 32. He also considered himself ugly and frail from his many health issues. René was the perfect specimen for Issei, and he wanted to have what she had. On June 11, 1981, Issei invited Renee to his apartment under the guise of translating poetry for an assignment they were working on. When she arrived, he invited her inside and got her settled at a desk where they would be studying. Renee began translating some poetry into her native language, her back to Issei, completely unaware of what he was planning. Without Renee knowing, Issei pulled his rifle on her. As she read aloud, he shot her in the neck. She slumped over and slid to the floor, dead. The shock of what he had done was too much for Issei's body to handle, and he promptly fainted. When Issei woke sometime later, he realized he now had to carry out his plan and feed his desires. First, Issei raped Renee's corpse. As he did this, he tried to bite into her flesh, but quickly discovered that his teeth were not sharp enough to do so. Reluctantly, Issei left her body and went out to buy a butcher knife. He returned home as quickly as possible and continued his depravity. Issei would say in a later interview that as he carved up Renee's body, he was struck with regret. Renee was a good friend, and he took that all away. Even if he felt bad about his actions, it didn't stop Issei from pushing forward. He ate most of Renee's breasts, her face, buttocks, feet, thighs, and neck. He ate some pieces raw and others he cooked. Anything Issei didn't or couldn't eat then, he stored in the fridge. Issei would later admit that one piece of Renee he did eat right away was her clitoris, which he swallowed whole. He said this was because Renee was on her period at the time, and he didn't like the smell of menstrual blood. At each stage of consumption, Issei would photograph Renee's body, carefully documenting the changes he was making to her flesh. All too soon, though, the earliest signs of decomposition began to set in, and Issei had no choice but to dispose of the remains of Renee's body. He dismembered the corpse and stuffed it into 2 suitcases. Intending to dispose of the body in a lake, Issei took the suitcases to Bois de Boulogne. Unfortunately for Issei, he was caught red-handed. French police found damning evidence pointing to the horrific nature of Issei's crime in the man's apartment and arrested him 4 days later. Issei was charged with murder and was held in a French psychiatric hospital for evaluation. He remained here for a number of years, awaiting his trial. Akira provided a good defense lawyer for his son, and the trial was highly publicized. Many members of the public called for the death penalty. The trial would not go how people wanted. Despite the obvious evidence, the bloodstains and body parts in Issei's apartment, and even catching him with the body, it seemed the prosecution didn't have a leg to stand on. During his incarceration in the psychiatric hospital, Issei was diagnosed with schizophrenia. This diagnosis led to Judge Jean-Louis Bruguier's decision to declare Issei as legally insane and therefore unfit to stand trial. He would instead order Issei to indefinite confinement in a mental institution. During his time in the hospital, Issei was visited by author Inuhiko Yomota. The author interviewed Issei, getting his side of the story. Issei would give Yomota a detailed account of the murder and its aftermath. The visit would culminate in a book titled In the Fog, a book that was horrific and gruesome, an uncensored look into the mind of a cannibal killer. In the Fog would gain publicity for Issei Sagawa. His infamy would lift him to a state of macabre celebrity. His newfound popularity would eventually prompt French authorities to have Issei deported back to Japan. Upon his arrival in his home country, he was immediately moved to Matsuzawa Hospital in Tokyo. Here, he would receive a new evaluation of his mental state. The examining psychologists would, unfortunately, declare Issei sane, and said his only motivation for killing Renee Hartvelt was sexual perversion. As Issei's charges in France had been dropped and the sealed court documents were not made available to Japanese authorities, he could not be legally detained in Japan. Issei Sagawa checked himself out of the hospital on August 12, 1986, and would remain a free man until his death. Due to the murder, the book written about him, and his controversial release, Issei became a minor celebrity. Between 1986 and 1997, he was frequently invited to be a guest speaker or commentator for various shows and events. In 1992, Issei appeared in Hisayasu Sato's exploitation film Unfaithful Wife, Shameful Torture as a sadosexual voyeur. Over the years, Issei turned his focus to writing. As of 2009, he had written at least 20 books, as well as a variety of articles and opinion pieces. He wrote not only about his own experience and crime, but others as well. One of his notable works was a book titled Shonen A, which detailed the 1997 Kobe child murders. This case involved a 14-year-old boy who murdered two other boys, aged 10 and 11. Ironically, Issei would also end up writing restaurant reviews for the Japanese tabloid Spa. Issei soon had trouble finding companies that would publish his work and struggled to find employment. He was nearly accepted by a French-language school at one point because the manager was impressed at his courage to use his real name. The employees protested, however, and his application was rejected. In a 2011 interview with Vice, Issei would say that being forced to make a living as a known murderer and cannibal was a terrible punishment. Issei's parents died in 2005, and he was prohibited from attending their funeral. Despite this, and his lack of income, he paid off their creditors and had to move into public housing. For a while, he lived off welfare benefits. In 2013, Issei was hospitalized due to a cerebral infarction, or an ischemic stroke. This kind of stroke is the most common type, and it ended up leaving his nervous system permanently damaged. As he lived alone, he needed daily assistance after he was released from the hospital. This came in the form of a caregiver or his younger brother. It was during this time that Issei said he fully regretted his obsession with death and cannibalism. Issei would live quietly for a number of years after his stroke. He eventually passed on November 24, 2022, from complications of pneumonia at a Tokyo hospital. He was 73. Was Issei simply a run-of-the-mill sexual deviant who let his wants get the better of him? Or were his impulses caused by untreated mental illness? Were the French authorities correct in their choice of punishment, or should Issei have been criminally convicted like the public wanted? Would it have made any difference in his eventual popularity? No matter the causes or the what-ifs, it's clear that Issei Sagawa was a twisted man who let his obsession consume him. We here at Villains with Vaughn would like to thank you for tuning in to another episode, and hope that you learned something new, even if some of the information can be a little bit hard to process. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and to ring that bell so you get notified whenever we go live, and check out both our voice actor and our author down in the description below. Trust me, you'll love their work too. We'll see you next time. Please be safe out there.